Hi people, I wanted to talk to you about some ideas and strategies I have regarding hunter leveling. I have touched on these things before, but that was a long time ago, a few months or so. Anyway, the core of this whole theory crafting is the fact that ranged auto shoot and melee auto attack doesn't share cooldown. So, you can theoretically use auto attack and auto shoot without having them interfering with each other at all. Potentially, you could increase your damage output by quite a lot. Obviously, this is difficult to do flawlessly. You should see in this footage how this can look in-game. So, how good would this playstyle really be? What are you sacrificing and what are you gaining? By the way, check the description for timestamps. The first issue might be that you're taking more damage when a mob actually attacks you. Obviously. However, the hunter has a decent amount of armor, being a male class past 40. And if you were to use Aspect of the Monkey, you could gain another 8% dodge. As hunters stack agility, you should have a decent number there already. Another thing you could grab to improve your survivability is improved Aspect of the Monkey and deflection in the survival tree. You should be looking at 10% parry and maybe 16% dodge with these two combined. That's quite nice. Hunters also have a pretty good spirit to health regeneration coefficient of 0.4. That's the third highest in the game after warriors and rogues. In case you didn't know, not all classes have the same health regeneration formulas. In my experience, the extra damage you take from fighting a mob in melee range isn't an issue. So you will most likely stay alive at least. But how big of a damage increase is it really? And well, that partly depends on how mana efficient you want to be. I like to send in my pets on the ranged mob, place an immolation trap, and pull my melee mob with an aimed shot. From here on, I use Raptor Strike off cooldown on the melee mob together with auto attack. Every second melee attack should be Raptor Strike. You can get a 20% increased crit chance on Raptor Strike from the survival tree for only 2 talent points. On the ranged mob, I mainly use auto shoots. The melee mob usually dies first, and then I'll finish off the ranged mob with an aimed shot. In the normal case, where things go smooth, I'm doing about 140 DPS throughout the fight, and the rotation isn't very mana heavy. You could avoid the Raptor Strike from your rotation to allow your mana to regenerate throughout the later parts of the fight. You might consider it a loss not using Aspect of the Hawk and not having the ability to get 30% ranged haste. However, that haste will make the weaving much more intense and difficult. In my experience, the damage you gain from shooting faster, you lose from not doing as many auto attacks. If I were to go only ranged, I would keep Serpent Sting up and have my pet do most of the damage. I find that if I use more abilities, I will have to drink every now and then, which is something I like to avoid. I of course use Hunter's Mark as well. Doing this method, I would perhaps do 90 to 100 DPS. Looking at this detail report, we see that my pet doesn't do very much DPS. And even though it's true that bears are tanking pets and not damage dealing pets, with all my points into Beast Mastery, I still think that this is a pretty poor performance. Obviously, I have pretty good gear, and that might be why my pet appears to be performing poorly. You should always try and have a good ranged weapon, and in case you chose this auto-weaving playstyle, you should also have a good melee weapon. I paid 9 gold for my sword and 37 gold for the bow. However, there are much cheaper ranged weapons compared to my bow. Also, make sure to get a scope for your ranged weapon. To summarize what I've said so far, this method is about as mana expensive as the normal Beastmaster Hunter playstyle. It pulls higher DPS by perhaps 30 to 40%, but it is dependent on both melee and ranged weapon. Something I haven't said, but which is somewhat understood, is that this method is more active and requires more attention compared to just auto-shooting as a Beastmaster. But in case you find hunter leveling boring, then this new playstyle is probably more interesting for you. Continuing, let's look at the talents you might want to choose. At level 42, I have chosen the following. I have gone down a few rows in Beast Mastery for increased speed and increased mitigation. Also, whenever you dodge an attack, you can use Mongoose Bites. Personally, I think that attack is too inefficient mono-wise, but that's just me. I've spent 7 points in survival for both increased mitigation and increased melee damage. I've also gone down a few points into marksmanship. I will likely go for something like this as I keep leveling. However, it's quite possible that I will go for a whole other method of leveling as I approach 51 or so, and might even switch talents due to that. So how can you optimize this playstyle? Well, partly you want a ranged weapon that is 0.5 seconds faster than your melee weapon. The reason for that is that your auto shots have a 0.5 seconds casting time, so by having this difference, the two autos cooldowns won't interfere with each other. If you have to choose one and let the other wait, you obviously choose the one that do the most damage. Auto shoot should always have priority over auto hit, and Raptor Strike should always be prioritized over auto shoots. Another thing is that you generally want to have as slow weapons as possible, partly to not make the weaving too intense, and partly because Raptor Strike has a big crit chance, which would increase the melee damage you do. The more melee hits that are Raptor Strikes, which works like Heroic Strike by the way, the more of your melee attacks are going to be yellow hits and have a 20% higher crit chance. In practicality, if that's a word, a melee weapon with a 3 seconds attack speed or slower should make 50% of your melee hits Raptor Strikes. Besides that, you could of course grab a whole bunch of consumables and get good weapons and gear, but that's just general ways to optimize damage output, and I'm not going to talk about that. Can you use this method in dungeons or against just one target? As for the one target scenario, that is a situation I haven't explored as much. With a slow enough ranged weapon, you might be able to run just into melee range, Raptor Strike, and then run back to the minimum shooting range. From what I've experienced, the gain in melee damage is often lost in ranged. But who knows? This playstyle is, as far as I know, very new and unexplored. Regardless of that, the fact remains that this auto-weaving playstyle is a DPS increase under reasonable circumstances, and that it is a much more active and, at least in my opinion, fun playstyle. I hope you found this interesting and perhaps got some ideas on how a hunter can be played. I recently started streaming, by the way. Check the link in the description in case you just can't get enough of my soothing, monotone voice. Thanks for watching, people. Like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if your lust for higher DPS is insatiable.